everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Index Office Hours. Today is the 10th of February, the second month of 2026, and this is Index Office Hours 243. Big number there. We are making a lot of progress, which is great. For anyone who's new to Index Office Hours, this is the town square where graph ecosystem participants come together and discuss the most important and relevant topics for indexes. As always, I like to say this, and today is no different. Today's conversation is, sorry, this is a conversation, and we do love participation, so feel free to get involved in today's conversation via voice or text. And obviously, if you're having any challenges with your microphone as it relates to voice, do let me know, and I'll get that sorted for you. As a reminder, this session is going to be recorded and posted onto public channels like YouTube. So if you are concerned about privacy, something to bear in mind. And with that, let's get into today's exciting agenda. I always hand over to Carlos, and today's so Carlos, feel free to take it away with RepoWatch.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to RepoWatch. This week has been slowish again. We have on the execution layer client and consensus layer clients 2 releases only. We have a new minor version from Lighthouse. We're now at 8.1.0. It's been a while since Lighthouse put out a new release. That brings some performance optimization, especially for validator setups and some bug fixes. And we have a new Firehose Ethereum from Streaming Fast. The patch version, we're now at 2.15.9. It also has some bug fixes, some performance improvements, especially around partial block support, which is kind of a new feature that we've been bringing in. Moving on to the graph stack, there has been 2 releases for Indexer Tap Agent and Indexer Service. They've been both bumped to major version 2, so we're at 2.0.0. And this one is about removing legacy V1 receipt support and supporting Horizon only going forward. And finally, on the Launchpad stack, we have 2 new chart releases out for Graph Network Indexer and Lighthouse, which keep up with these new upstream releases of this week. So that's it for RepoWatch. So I'm handing over to Hua, as usual.
Thanks, Carlos. Okay, getting into Protocol Watch, we have a few things to cover, starting with forum governance. We have 2 disputes. I think those were already up last week. The latest on those are that we are investigating. The fisherman already provided a lot of useful information. Unfortunately, we had a few people on vacation last week, so yeah, the investigation is still going. But we will be updating briefly on that. We haven't had any response from the indexer itself so far. We're also waiting on that front. But yeah, aside from that, we are still investigating. Getting into forum research, we do have some of the updates for January for some core dev updates, mainly Edge and Node and GraphOps. Those are usually pretty lengthy, so they are linked in the agenda if you're interested in any of those. For the contracts repository, we have a bunch of PRs. Some of them are just simple chores like pumping some versions or publishing some new address books, but we also have some others that are related to dips, issuance, and a few other things that are quite interesting. And for the network subgraphs, we haven't yet released, I don't know if you guys are aware, we've been having some issues with delegator data. We've been fixing them and releasing new versions as we went, but we're waiting on the latest version to be released, actually synced in Studio and then released, which also tackles some issues, particularly with the realized rewards field for delegators and delegations, which was unfortunately broken due to misinitialization of the provision values. Horizon upgrade is quite complex, and there were many particular edge cases, mostly around the transition period, which were either we didn't test it as thoroughly as we expected, or there were some differences in mainnet versus testnet. But we're solving those. We managed to spot a few issues. There's also an issue that's been flagged in the repo related to the indexing a query if cut, which, as you might know, have been in the contracts, they have been kind of like or changed in the description of what they do. Instead of being what the indexer takes, it's what the delegators take. But there seems to be some bug reports regarding, not properly supporting that, which we are also investigating. So there will be a few releases of the network subgraph as we fix more and more of those issues, trying to make everything manageable. We're also trying to not make 1,000 new releases every week. So we are delaying the publishing of some of those until we can make sure that a bunch of those fixes are all encompassed in a single release. But at the same time, we don't want to take too long fixing those things and not releasing, because those issues are issues nonetheless. So we want to fix them as soon as possible. So we're kind of like playing around a little bit with those releases, but be aware that there might be some releases most likely this week and potentially also next week or the next one. So be aware on those. We are, of course, going to be giving a heads up when we are aware that we're going to be doing a release, so that everyone's aware. And that's pretty much it for Protocol Watch. So I don't think we have a replacement for Project Watch, so I'm going to be handing over to Abel now.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your sections there. Very much appreciate you both. Cool. Well, let's get straight into the main topic of today's conversation. So many of you last week were asking about some general updates from GraphNode. Kind of have specific questions about all the latest, and I thought I'd take it upon myself to ping our good friend Lutter. I know that everybody loves David Lutter. He's such a valuable person to have on IOH. His insight is just unbelievably he has an unbelievable amount of insight when he joins IOH. So yeah, today we have the good fortune of inviting Lutter on. He's going to give us a update on GraphNode. We want to structure this as an update and then an AMA. And then anything he really wants to talk about. So Lutter, without further ado, feel free to join the stage. There you go. Sam just called you the GOAT there. You are indeed the GOAT, the greatest of all time.
All right, can you all hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, okay. I don't have fancy slides. This is more like to talk through some things. And ask questions as I go. I think other people from the GraphNode team are here too, and they should feel free to jump in. So what's been happening in GraphNode land over the last 4 to 6 months, I would say. A lot of it is about sort of modernizing the code base, right? Like GraphNode is now 6-7 years old, and there's definitely some corners that need to be touched up. Just because the world has moved on and GraphNode hasn't necessarily in like the libraries it uses and all that. Like a huge push was by Krishna to change the library that we use to talk to RPC providers, because what we've been using has been deprecated upstream for a long time. Web3, we're now using Alloy. I worked on making our database interactions async. If you're running GraphNode, those are probably not things that you see much. Although the async store should make it less likely that GraphNode locks up or becomes sort of unexplainably slow in certain places. I've also been on a tear to remove stuff that we don't need anymore. For example, I pulled out substreams and Arweave subgraphs and stuff like that. All things that aren't supported on the network anymore. And I love the picture. Yes, that's exactly the glasses I'm wearing right now in the chat. One thing I did is I added a SQL interface. Like you can query subgraphs with SQL, but it's turned off by default because on the network I don't know how that would be surfaced on the network, and I'm also a little worried that it might break things, but if you want to play with it, in Docs implementation, there's a SQL interface .md, which explains how to use it. And if you do use it, let me know. And if you have ideas for how this should be evolved, whether we should turn it on by default and all that. Yeah, I'd love to hear it. Yeah, I did a lot of work we have something called the recent blocks cache. So when GraphNode needs to read blocks from the blocks cache database, we put a cache in there, but that's been in there for, I don't know, 2 years maybe, but it never really worked. I finally made it to work, and in the upgrade index and the hosted service, it led to like a 90% reduction in the amount of data we pull from those databases. So it should also be good for anybody running GraphNode. In terms of the load on block cache databases, and that cache is only for, I think by default, it's like the last 300 blocks of any chain, which is what subgraphs that are synced and trying to keep up with the chain head are mostly doing. This was more to try out AI on a bigger project, but I think it makes huge sense. We've been talking about, like, GraphCLI is not in great shape. It's been basically not well maintained for quite some time now. And I think the last commit to it was like in last October. So in the GraphNode team, we've talked for a while about rewriting the GraphCLI in Rust, just because we're all more familiar with it, and then it would be more similar to GraphNode, and we could use some GraphNode infrastructure for validations, for example. Right now, that story with GraphCLI is pretty sad, where you write a subgraph and it might have problems that you only discover when you deploy that subgraph to an actual graph node, which is pretty frustrating. So I've been working on rewriting GraphCLI in Rust. There's a really big PR open if you want to have a look. And I mean, the plan is that eventually that Rust GraphCLI will become the default, and we'll make the TypeScript one just a shell that downloads the Rust one, and the actual work happens in Rust. The PR is somewhere. And I don't know how many of you know, but for a while now, GraphNode has this thing called GND, which can run or runs a graph node locally for development. It like watches your files as you're developing a subgraph, and as you make changes, it redeploys to that sort of special purpose graph node instance, so that you have sort of a much better local development experience. And Max has also been looking at better test infrastructure for that Rust version of GraphCLI. So the idea is that that GND will turn into a full sort of development environment, development tool for subgraphs that lets you do most of the work locally, write unit tests, run it against your own graph node without worrying about setting up Postgres and all that. And then of course deploy like what GraphCLI does today, but hopefully in a much more comfortable ergonomic way. And then the last bigger thing that that's happening right now is I'm sure all of you have heard about AMP, the big new thing that we're working on. And Eon's been spending a lot of time on make it possible to pull AMP data in GraphNode, so that you can query that data with GraphQL or maybe the SQL interface under the heading of like AMP powered subgraphs. And most of the backend code has landed in GraphNode and working on sort of CLI experience to help you author subgraphs based on AMP. Hopefully that'll be done pretty soon too. Right, those were sort of my updates. I don't know if there's any more questions that people have.
Amazing. Well, there you go. Those are some updates. Very keen to hear people's thoughts. I see Mark Andrews has come in, so maybe not to put you on the spot there, but if you have any questions, feel free to fire away. Vincent in the chat said, awesome, really appreciate the work you've put in recently.